When the FBI released hundreds of pages of Nikola Tesla's missing files, rumors sprang up all across the internet regarding the whereabouts of Tesla's work on the so-called death ray. Along with this, headlines sprang up about Tesla's hypothetical extraterrestrial origins. Did Tesla himself help write a book explaining who these Venusian space people were? What is fact and what is fiction? This is the question we always seek to answer here, so let's jump in.
Do you find yourself running back and forth to local spiritual shops because you forgot supplies for your new moon ritual? Or have you always been interested in magic but were hesitant to jump in? Whether you're a seasoned practitioner or just starting out, Witch's Box has everything you need to improve your magic practice. Each Witch's Box subscription is guided by a specific theme and centers around a transformative spell or practice that varies each month. Each box also includes ritual items, herbs, and a unique page from a book of shadows that you can add to your own discipline as you see fit. You'll gain exclusive access to private online gatherings where you can exchange ideas and ask questions about the contents of the box. There is also a books-only subscription, various mystery boxes, and the option to handpick individual items from the online store. Visit www.thewitchesbox.com/ref/AWSW podcast to subscribe. And by purchasing through our link, you are also supporting the podcast. So for that, we thank you. Once again, that's www.thewitchesbox.com/ref/AWSW podcast. Join the global circle of practitioners and open your world to vast possibilities with Witch's Box. Get yours today.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Riley Finwood, and you are listening to As Within, So Without. I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you so much, all you listeners, for your patience with me. I know last time it was kind of lame where I left off because it was kind of an interesting subject we were talking about, but we had to go on hiatus. And, sometimes just life hands you a handful of tower cards and you have to give them your full attention. So I had to take a few months off. To make a long story short, a family member of mine got very sick. I quit my job and moved back in with them very long story short. But we are settling back into a routine, and I have several episodes lined up for you now. Interestingly enough, they say in the podcast world that if you can make it past episode 7, you're golden. And the last episode was episode 7, and the universe tried to take me down. But here we are, episode 8. Man, I am so happy to be back. So let's do a quick recap since it has been a while. Last time we talked about Tesla's personal background, along with his relationship with Thomas Edison, and as Tesla grew older, rumors sprang up around his speculative work regarding a particle weapon or death ray. We went into the guts of the FBI missing files, which honestly brought more questions up than they answered. For instance, most of the names were redacted, so it's hard to tell who was writing the letters, the requests for information, whether or not they were relevant people or conspiracy theorists, which there's nothing wrong with a good conspiracy. We'll talk more about that later. We left off as things began to get a little more weird with a woman named Margaret Storm and her claim that Tesla was an alien from the planet Venus. Along with this, we're going to delve a little bit more into some conspiracies regarding what happened the night Tesla died. So, without further ado, let's just get right back into it. So this first part here, I wanted to talk more about the drama, so to speak, regarding what happened the night Tesla died, because here's the thing. Most of these missing files has to do with that and the FBI's investigation into the whereabouts of the missing files if you believe that they didn't have them in the first place. And here's also the thing. I am not a conspiracy podcast, though I just recently guest spoke on one. It's called Hold Up, Wait a Minute. I met one of the co-hosts, Kenny, on Reddit. Actually, the conspiracy subreddit, believe it or not. And I went on there and they wanted me to talk about the CIA declassified gateway process, which I did. We spoke for a very long time. Those guys are super, super cool. If you want to have your minds blown every day, head over to Hold Up, Wait a Minute. They have the most compelling guests. They have really, really good questions. They kept me on my toes, believe me. Yeah, if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you are into conspiracy at least a little bit. So head on over there. Shane and Kenny are great. You're going to love their work. So, yep. Anyway, back to this podcast, which is a mostly spiritual and scientific podcast. We're going to talk about a little bit more, but what I want to get to is the alien stuff, and I know that's what you want to hear about too, and I might be pissing some of you off by skipping through this, but hey, I'm doing my best here, all right? There are people a lot smarter than me who couldn't figure this out, and at the end of the day, we don't have the death ray blueprints, so, what does it matter? Is kind of my opinion here. But we're not going to talk about my opinion yet. We're going to talk about my opinion later. So let's go to Tesla's nephew conspiracy is what I dubbed this arc. So Sava Kosanović, Tesla's nephew, was an exiled Yugoslavian ambassador. So the FBI has documentation of several dozen pages of investigation of Sava Kosanović, based on speculation that he may have broken into Tesla's hotel after his death and stolen his work. This wasn't proven, and much of the documentation on this was correspondence between agents and rumor investigations and foreign articles and lists of people that may or may not have been connected with Tesla and or Kosanović. I hope I'm saying that right, by the way. The FBI's investigation is documented in several hundred pages. Before I read the missing files, what I wanted to find was a lot of occult, like esoteric technology or theories that Tesla had about the universe, like his 369 theory of the universe, which I think I might spend a little time in maybe a part 3 talking about that because that's really cool stuff. But alas, that was probably wishful thinking, as most of this work was regarding it was like a soap opera. It was like reading a soap opera is what it was, trying to figure out who took the pages. Was it you? Was it you? I don't have them. You have them. You must be hiding something. It's a lot of that. So if you are interested in the drama and the intrigue of Tesla's missing work, I would encourage you to click the link in my show notes and head over to the FBI website and check it out for yourself. So in an attempt to wrap this death ray saga in a box, here's the generally accepted gist of what happened to Tesla's missing work. Sava Kosanović was eventually able to procure some of Tesla's work, and it is now in a museum in Yugoslavia. Just after World War II, there was a renewed interest in beam weapons. The military supposedly had a project called Project Nick, and Tesla's death ray was an inspiration for the project. However, it is unclear whether or not the FBI had the missing files. Either way, this occurred in Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, was heavily funded and placed under the command of Brigadier General L.C. Craigie to test the feasibility on Tesla's concept. Details of the experiments were never published, and the project was apparently discontinued. The results of this project were never published, and we don't know anything about it. So, it's time to insert my personal opinion. It is no wonder that everyone thinks that there's a conspiracy afoot, because that sounds very conspiratorial, very convenient that they just disappeared. Do you think any of us believe that? It is this one's opinion that the FBI not only has Tesla's missing work, but is using it to this day. Did Tesla really have a death ray? At the end of the day, that's what we all want to know. I think he had something that scared the government. I think they have whatever technology Tesla was trying to build. Whether or not it came to fruition in Tesla's time is another question. I think there was an attempt to discredit him through rumors of him losing his mind. I'm not so sure he lost his mind. That's still a possibility to me, though I think that John Trump specifically tried to discredit him by saying his work was speculative and all that. So considering Tesla's work and his inventions were revolutionary and they changed the world, And for him to be sort of just treated that way, it's fishy to me. I think that he would have been taken more seriously. And I think John Trump had reason to not only discredit Tesla because of the dangerous aspect of his research, but also I read somewhere they had a feud. I think Tesla embarrassed him at a convention or something. I'm hazy on the details of that, but maybe he had a personal vendetta. It all sounds very dramatic and, like I said earlier, soap opera worthy. And it's funny how history repeats itself, because the company Tesla recently sued the US government, aka Donald Trump, over tariffs. So Trump and Tesla at it again. Back to the whole death ray thing. It's just one of those things that we, the people, don't get to know until decades later, if we ever get to know at all. Just like in the CIA Declassified Gateway Process episode, they had that information decades before they released it to the public. So there's always this sense of technology and knowledge of the universe, etc., has a lag time between its discovery and when everyone else is allowed to access the information. And this is entirely frustrating, and my deepest feeling is that in order for humanity to progress fast enough to survive, say, the sun exploding, which it will eventually, we're going to have to get past trying to kill each other, because the government hypothetically keeps information classified for, of course, a variety of reasons, but a big one being they don't want enemies to catch up, so to speak. Of course, it goes much deeper than that, but again, I'm not a conspiracy podcast, though in this case, I am not naive to the nuance, so to say. Now, think if we had the death ray tech publicly available, shoot, like I can understand why they would have kept that one under wraps. You know, some 12-year-old would build one in the shed, like, I get that. Regardless, I think Tesla's understanding of energy was way ahead of its time, and I have a suspicion that his secret work is being used by Big Brother. But again, this is simply my opinion, and I encourage you to form your own and hit me up. Join us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Check out the website at aswithinsowithoutpodcast.com and send me a message. Check out all those cool links we got over there. I just set up a book recommendation page where I'll be dropping links to books I mentioned in the podcast. So yeah, that's a brand new one, so go check it out. So finally, I want to talk about the Venus saga, as I have called it. The whole internet exploded, especially over there on TikTok for a while, saying that the FBI says Tesla's from Venus, and I was getting extremely frustrated for a while because that's not true. The FBI didn't say that. The FBI simply has documents of people saying that he was from Venus. The FBI doesn't really put their opinion in their documents. They just sort of, in fact, they're very good about that, and that's what makes it so hard to read, is some of this correspondence between FBI agents and other FBI agents is so dry. I mean, they're very careful to not insert any emotion whatsoever into anything that they say. I guess the most compelling thing about this is why the FBI even bothered to put this information in these files, unless they sort of took it seriously. So I think we should take it seriously ourselves. Let us begin the Venus saga. So the first document we see is written by John Storm, Margaret's husband, and it's a letter to the followers of their newsletter called Interplanetary Sessions. It announces a lecture to be presented by George Van Tassel and Dan Fry regarding flying saucers. George Van Tassel operated the Giant Rock spaceport and wrote 2 books, one called I Wrote a Flying Saucer and another called Into This World and Out Again. Dan Fry wrote The White Sands Incident, a recounting of a trip he made with a flying saucer from a desert area in New Mexico to New York City and back, all within the span of 32 minutes. I have not read those books, so I cannot confirm nor deny their validity. The newsletter goes on to outline a literal schedule of a full-scale operations of flying saucers that would be visible all over America on July 1st of that year, 1957. Let me double check. Yes, 1957. I remember those days like it was yesterday. Anyway, so there would be 3 phases of this operation. The first would be saucer events in New York at 9 a.m., Washington, D.C. at 9:25 a.m., and general North American areas at 9:35 a.m. The second phase would be a repeat of the first phase, but beginning around 12 o'clock noon on the same day. And phase 3 would be a full-scale operations all over America beginning at 7 p.m. This information was supposedly channeled by a man named George King, which I first read as King George and was quite surprised that there was time travel also involved in the story. But anyway, I looked him up, and I will leave a link to his website in the show notes for you, sweet listener. Dr. George King, born in England in 1919, was an inventor, occultist, spiritual guru, and channeler. One day in May in 1854, wait a minute, if he was born in 1919, how could it be I've heard this in 1954, 18? There is time travel afoot. Oh dear, oh dear. It was a typo. It was a typo, guys. 1954. One day in May in 1954, he suddenly heard a large booming voice say,
"Prepare yourself. You are to become the voice of interplanetary parliament."
So yeah, I don't know who interplanetary parliament is. They're new to me, and I've been in the New Age world for a little while. This extraterrestrial collective claimed to want to use King to help usher in the New Age. We've heard this before. So yes, we are getting into the good stuff. I was unable to confirm whether or not King's channeled information about the flying saucer events actually came to fruition or not. I even looked through old newspaper archives, but I couldn't find any information on flying saucers on that day. Doesn't necessarily mean it didn't happen, but it just seems unlikely that they wouldn't have put it in the news somewhere. The newsletter made it seem like it was going to be one huge life-changing event, and in the New Age world, we're kind of used to that, right? There's always some big thing about to happen. It's always about to happen, and people make predictions, and it never happens. But that's okay, because we just misunderstood it. And it's usually always fun to talk about the nature of timelines here, and to say something to the effect of, oh, well, obviously it happened, just not on this timeline. But it always just sounds like a huge cop-out to me. Still, it is enjoyable to sometimes meander down that rabbit hole. So next, let's talk about Margaret Storm. I know I started talking about her last time. We talked about her terrible website. It's not her website. Someone made the website about her, and how it was all these flashing colors, just terrible HTML and animated links and all that fun stuff. I was surprised that the mouse didn't have glitter coming off of it. That website actually led me down another rabbit hole. Now, whether or not this information is credible is another story, and I'll leave a link in the show notes so that you can go through this website and you decide. You take what resonates and leave the rest. So there are 3 pieces of written material that I'm going to be reading clips from, or reading passages from. The first one is, of course, Margaret Storm's Return of the Dove. The second one is The Wall of Light by Arthur Matthews and supposedly Nikola Tesla himself. And the third one is going to be Talking with the Planets, which is a small passage written by Tesla himself regarding interplanetary communication. Yeah, let's get into it. I'm going to read you these little bits of each of these, and then I'll leave links in the show notes so you can read them if you wish to do so yourself. And then we're going to talk about conclusions. This first passage is from Return of the Dove by Margaret Storm. Historians agree that Nikola Tesla was born at midnight between July 9th and July 10th in the year of 1856. Nikola himself hinted on a few occasions that this was not the date of his birth. These hints were disregarded along with hundreds of other statements made by Tesla, because in most quarters he was regarded as being a bit impractical. This was not a criticism, for his genius was so highly respected that it was generally conceded that he did not have to measure up to conventional standards. He was allowed his little eccentricities, his passing fancies. The space people have now stated that Nikola was born on board their ship on a flight from Venus, and that they landed on Earth at midnight between July 9th and 10th, 1856. When the space people say that Nikola was born on board one of their ships, they do not mean that it was a physical birth. Physical conception and the birthing processes known on this planet are not used elsewhere. A sex system was introduced here after the laggards came in order to keep the race in manifestation and to provide for the re-embodiment in groups bound by karma. This allowed karmic debts to be paid off in kind under the old law of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. On other planets, positive and negative light rays are used to produce a physical form which can be occupied by an evolving life stream. The form is of full stature. It is only on this planet that tiny baby forms are utilized. She jumps after this kind of around some New Age concepts themselves and kind of goes off on long tangents regarding those things, and then jumps back a little bit into Tesla's story. The rest of it continues on in a similar way, talking about little pieces of Tesla and then sort of shooting off into these tangents of mysticism, spirituality, those sorts of things. So Tesla was born, quote unquote, on an alien spaceship and then given to a pair of human parents to be raised as a human. And according to this account, Tesla was at least semi-cognizant of his origins from the stars. He used this semi-consciousness to guide him in a lot of his pursuits here on Earth. Then we go on to talk about how Tesla never lost his vision of free energy because he believed that free energy meant humanity could be free. He knew this at a very young age. Margaret Storm says as young as 10 years old, he knew this. And interestingly, we begin to talk about how his obsession with electricity and lightning led to him trying to figure out the weather and the belief that humans can control the weather. So let me read this to you. Now, it can be readily seen that his invention might have been premature. He never placed any limits on his thinking, and even while walking over the mountains, through the downpour, he envisioned the day when rain could be produced when and where needed, thus providing an abundant food supply the world around. He never lost his vision, and 30 years later, in the mountains of Colorado, he produced bolts of lightning. He planned to use such bolts in his rain-making device, but was stopped by the United States Patent Office, which refused to go along with his invention. Now, it can be readily seen that his invention might have been premature, for both rain and lightning are produced by the activities of the angelic kingdom. The water devas, fire devas, and wind devas serve as housekeepers in the atmosphere around the planet. When they wish to wash out a certain section of the atmosphere, they produce as much rain as they need and shoot bolts of lightning through the skies to counteract poisonous astral accumulations. The amount of rain that happens to fall to the ground depends entirely upon how much scrubbing is being done up yonder. When the scrub pails are empty, the rain stops. The devas are not charged with duties such as going around with watering pots for the purpose of irrigating gardens. That problem is in the human province. The devas are responsive and can be called into action by invocation. Or when enough water has been sprinkled and floods threaten, they can be stopped by invocation. Human beings should be trained to recognize their own karmic results and do something intelligent about it instead of moaning about the weather. All weather conditions can be under human control. Noah tackled that problem and took the steps necessary to deal with it. Then he sent forth the dove from the ark, and the dove returned with a plucked olive leaf, the symbol of peaceful waters subsiding from the flooded lands. But the dove cannot return unless people first send the dove forth. When Tesla walked through the rainstorm, he was witnessing angelic activities, and though he might not have thought of the matter in quite that way, he knew that somehow his true work belonged up there in space, high above the mountains of Earth. He knew that all worthwhile works must start at the source. And particularly this thing about the weather, I want to talk about this because I hear it come up a lot, all the time in the spiritual world, in the conspiracy world. So the idea that our government can control the weather. And you know what's funny is I really love this one song. It's by Willow Smith, and I have suspicions about the Smith family. Ask me about that later. But Willow Smith has this song called Flowers. And here's the lyrics. Actually, all the lyrics are pretty golden and about aliens. But the line I'm referring to is, but the government is trying to drown us out and not help them. But the indigos are here. We remembered how we can all shift the weather. I particularly love that song because it talks about Atlantis. It talks about the Greys. It's just... Oh, and Jaden has a song about the Pleiadians. So I love it. What do y'all think? What do y'all think about the Smith family? What are your theories about them? Because they are definitely not from here. Moving on, another interesting point is the title of the book, Return of the Dove. It's referenced, as you heard, the Ark story, Noah's Ark, and all that. So apparently Noah knew how to manipulate the weather back in biblical times. What do y'all think? I want to hear your thoughts on this. This is some cool stuff. Some cool stuff. Moving on to The Wall of Light by Arthur Matthews. So who is Arthur Matthews? He and Tesla were friends. You could say that Matthews was somewhat of an assistant to Tesla. This book was evidently co-written between the two of them. However, Tesla's parts seem to be mainly autobiographical in nature, and he doesn't talk too much about aliens at all. It's Matthews who goes on into quite a bit of detailed account of his contact with the Venusians. Side note, there are rumors of Matthews being Tesla's long-lost secret son, though this is entirely unsupported by evidence and is pure speculation. But let's be real, all I've been talking about for the past 20 minutes has been pure speculation. But through my research, I have discovered that the whole Tesla secret son thing is an entirely another rabbit hole, and I must say, seeing a picture of the two of them side by side is somewhat compelling, though I will leave that where it stands. There isn't much information around, like in Margaret Storm's case, about Arthur Matthews. It seems to me that these people were left out of Tesla's mainstream story for various reasons, and as we know, Tesla's mainstream story is shrouded in misinformation and twisted up in ways that are difficult to unravel. I don't know about you all, but growing up, I was taught that Thomas Edison was the hero of the story, and Tesla only got a few paragraphs in the history books, if that. Gotta love the old history textbook propaganda method. Anyway, it's claimed that Tesla was in contact with these Venusians via an invention of his called the Teslascope. Matthews didn't actually meet these extraterrestrials until after Tesla's death, and here is his own recounting of his first meeting with the Venusians. I went to bed early that night but could not sleep. An oppressive sense of something strange impending descended on me like a pall. Finally, I arose and dressed. I went outside and looked up at the sky, but all I could see were stars sparkling in full brilliancy. I returned to the house and settled down to read, but not for long, for suddenly the alarm signal on the Teslascope rang shrilly. I ran outside and at first saw nothing except the sparkling stars. Then I noticed something queer towards the mountain. It appeared to be darker than usual. It was indeed, for some huge object seemed to cover most of the mountain. I began to walk toward it, and as I came near to our barn, I was suddenly confronted by two persons. Both men were nearly 6 feet tall, and in the brilliant starlight I could discern their bright blue eyes and golden hair. But what registered with me the most was that these beings radiated an aura of perfect health and happiness. Immediately, I sensed a feeling of goodwill emanating from them, which took away any fear I might have had at this sudden meeting. They were wearing gray coveralls, and somehow I knew that they were space beings. I noted with interest that both were bareheaded, with no helmets or other apparatus, and yet they seemed to have no difficulty in breathing Earth air. I have since been asked if there were any physical differences between Earthmen and these space people, but I can only say that I saw none. And why should there be? Are we not all built the same, in the likeness of God? Then one of them spoke to me in very good English, saying,
Good morning, Arthur Matthews. May we go with you into your workshop?
If this was a surprise, there was a greater one to follow, as he continued.
We are from Venus, and we have come to see what you are doing with Tesla's inventions.
Completely taken aback, I could only blurt out, How am I supposed to believe you're from Venus? The one who appeared to be the leader answered calmly,
When you see our ship, you will believe, but before we go, I will make a sketch of Tesla's anti-war machine. No one on Earth but you knows its secret. Will that convince you?
I nodded and led them to my workshop. With a few deft strokes, he drew a sketch for me, and I could only accept it as truth. A brief inspection and explanation of the work I was doing on Tesla devices followed. No comments were made, and I was left to assume that they were satisfied with my efforts. Then the two Venusians said that they would take me to their spaceship. We walked towards the mountain, and soon I was staring wide-eyed at the gigantic proportions of the mothership X-12, hardly believing my senses. While my two companions chuckled at my bewilderment, the landed ship, which appeared to be made of gray metal, looked like two gargantuan saucers put together rim to rim. Circling these rims about 20 feet away from the main body of the craft was an unsupported band of material, later referred to as the guide ring, which was not attached to the ship by any visible means and appeared to be held in place by some magnetic force. Penetrating the center of the ship was a tubular shaft 50 feet in diameter and 300 feet in height, the top and bottom ends of which protruded from the ringed saucers, which were 700 feet in diameter. The bottom end of this large tube rested on the ground, and I could see an open doorway in which stood two of the crew who greeted us with a hand salute. My companions invited me in for an inspection tour of the great ship, and we stepped into an elevator which I was told had no cables and was operated by willpower. We stopped off at the level which was devoted to the storage of some of the 24 small spacecraft this mothership carried, ground vehicles and other equipment. The second level comprised of the living quarters and the crew, gardens, recreation area, study rooms, and a meeting hall. Living quarters were compartments for single persons or married couples, for the crew was made up of both sexes. And these units comprised a small hallway, a large living room, bedroom, bathroom with toilet, and storage locker. I'm sorry, the thought of people from Venus needing to use the bathroom cracks me up. We don't get to evolve past that? That's annoying. Anyway, all rooms were carpeted with some form of pliant plastic, and the walls were hung with beautiful paintings. I discovered the outer wall of the living room was in fact see-through, giving a full view of the space outside. The outer door of each compartment led out to the small flower-bedded garden. At this point, I commented on the lack of a kitchen in these units and was informed that the Venusians never spoil their food by cooking it. They grow their own produce aboard and eat it fresh. We then came to the recreation area, which was covered in some form of simulated grass on which a number of the crew were playing a game somewhat like basketball. This gave me an opportunity to study these Venusians more closely, and I noted that they ranged from 5'6" to 6 feet in height. They were blue-eyed, skin coloring a bronze suntan, and their hair ranged from golden blonde to a reddish brown. They all appeared in glowing health, and their eyes sparkled with a natural joie de vivre. Personal opinion time. Well, right off the bat, I feel this was almost overly detailed, if that makes any sense. Not only this, but certain details themselves threw me completely for a loop, like the basketball thing and the eating thing. And I don't know about you, but almost every account I've heard or listened to of an alien encounter either doesn't mention food at all or explains how the extraterrestrials have evolved past the need for physical sustenance. But again, I will reiterate, who am I to know? This is simply something that stood out to me. Other than this, these Venusians sound like a more human-like rendition of the Pleiadians, the so-called Nordic race from the Pleiades. So that was a small piece of Arthur Matthews' book, The Wall of Light. I keep wanting to call him Arthur Miller, but this is not Death of a Salesman. Then it would be about Edison, right? Anyway, before we get into the conclusions, I want to read one last thing to you. It's a paper written by the man himself, Nikola Tesla, and it's called Talking with the Planets, written in 1901 and published in the Collier's Weekly. But in this age of reason, it is not astonishing to find persons who scoff at the very thought of affecting communication with a planet. First of all, the argument is made that there is only a small probability of other planets being inhabited at all. This argument has never appealed to me. In the solar system, there seem to be only 2 planets, Venus and Mars, capable of sustaining life such as ours. But this does not mean that there might not be, on all of them, some other forms of life. Chemical processes may be maintained without the aid of oxygen, and it is still a question whether chemical processes are absolutely necessary to the sustenance of organized beings. My idea is that the development of life must lead to forms of existence that will be possible without nourishment and will not be shackled by consequent limitations. Why should a living being not be able to obtain all the energy it needs for the performance of its life's functions from the environment, instead of through consumption of food and transforming, by a complicated process, the energy of chemical combinations into life-sustaining energy? If there were such beings on one of these planets, we should know next to nothing about them, nor is it necessary to go far in our assumptions, for we can readily conceive that, in the same degree as the atmosphere diminishes in density, moisture disappears, and the planet freezes up, organic life might also undergo corresponding modifications, leading finally to forms which, according to our present ideas of life, are impossible. Then he goes on to talk about the tech he was working on in Colorado, a device which would transmit electricity through the earth without wires and hopefully one day to another planet. At the present stage of progress, there would be no insurmountable obstacle in constructing a machine capable of conveying a message to Mars, nor would there be any great difficulty in recording signals transmitted to us by the inhabitants of the planet, if they be skilled electricians. Communication, once established, even in the simplest way, as by a mere interchange of numbers, the progress toward more intelligible communication would be rapid. Absolute certitude as to the receipt and interchange of messages would be reached as soon as we could respond with the number 4, say, in reply to the signal 1, 2, 3. The Martians, or the inhabitants of whatever planet had signaled to us, would understand at once that we had caught their message across the gulf of space and had sent back a response. To convey a knowledge of form by such means is, while very difficult, not impossible, and I have already found a way of doing it. For that it will sometime be accomplished must be clear to every thoughtful being. Something, at least, science has gained. But I hope that it will also be demonstrated soon that in my experiments in the West, I was not merely beholding a vision, but had caught sight of a great and profound truth. Couple things to note here. First of all, my hunch about food was right according to Tesla. He doesn't agree as well that if you evolved past a certain point, you wouldn't need food. So there. Second thing is, it kind of sounds like he knows something, doesn't it? Just like he sounds really sure of himself. And, you know, that could be a side effect of a high IQ. I would know. But for the sake of time, let's go ahead and get to our conclusions here and say goodbye to the Tesla saga. And what a saga this was. This episode took me months to complete, and there are plenty of good reasons for that. The path of information was incredibly convoluted, and as such, I did a lot of backtracking and fact-checking, and it seemed the closer I got to some groundbreaking secret, it was shut down and sent me 3 steps back. So in essence, here's what I will say about Nikola Tesla as a whole. Do I believe Nikola Tesla was from Venus? I wish I could give a straight yes or no. My stance on the extraterrestrials shifts with the sands. One day I'm like, hell yeah, let's call the Arcturians and shoot the shit. The next day I'm like, well, maybe they're just a figment of our unconscious minds. And then I read a bunch of Carl Jung. Don't misunderstand me here. I absolutely believe aliens exist. Just mathematically, it seems unlikely that they don't. But in this case of Tesla being from Venus, that's another question. If the Venusians were real, to me, they seem like maybe an evolved part of the human race from the future or something like that. They didn't really seem too terribly evolved. And we could see that based on, they still had to eat food. They still had to go to the bathroom. They still had the general standard traditional marriage, which was weird to me as well. In the case of Tesla actually physically being from Venus, that's also a stretch for me, considering, many factors, but mainly we have the whole starseed concept, right? Which is, on the edge of my believability scale. I've drifted back and forth on that one too. And for those who don't know, starseeds are typically thought of as souls incarnating here on Earth from other galaxies, other planets, other dimensions for a specific purpose, for a specific mission. That would make more sense in Tesla's case. But it was written that he was literally from the planet Venus. So that threw me for a loop. It's it's a kind of a stretch for me to believe that in particular. Sometimes it's difficult to draw the line between actual true belief in something and the pure desire to believe in something. I want to believe extraterrestrials have visited this planet and have been visiting us for a long time and will continue to do so. I really do. And I have some personal stories that would give evidence to that fact. However, our memories, dreams, visions during meditation, they're all wishy-washy. Human memory itself is crazy unreliable. And each time you remember something from your past, you're creating a new memory of that memory, which further distorts it from its original state. So as time passes, I become more and more unsure of what I really experienced. For example, I once saw 3 red lights in the sky one night as I was taking the trash out after work. These lights weren't making any noise like an airplane or helicopter would. So I thought, cool drones? Then I realized they were way too high up in the air to be drones, but maybe they were, I don't know. The weirdest part was how they were moving. They were flying in and out around each other, almost like they were weaving some sort of helix pattern. I dropped my bag of garbage and took a video of this, and I will dig through my phone to find it if anyone is interested in looking at it. Unfortunately, like all UFO videos, the quality is subpar because the lights were so far away. Do you have a UFO story? Hit me up. Tell me about it. I would like to do an episode where I just read your personal stories on UFO encounters. I think that would be awesome. Other than that, do I believe history did Tesla dirty? Absolutely. And I think there's something more going on here than simply the world wasn't ready for his technology. I think the world wasn't ready for what was behind the technology. Tesla wanted human progress, human evolution, through invention, through technology. His colleagues wanted to get rich, it seemed. The government wanted his potential weaponry. There's a lot to hide, New Age mysticism aside. That being said, there is so much information about the more esoteric side of Tesla, you have to wonder, where would we be as a global society right now if we had the honest to source truth about Tesla? We may never know, but I have a feeling the Earth would look a lot different. So, I will end this episode with Tesla's last written message. When I have been saying that as one day of our lives is, so will in all probability the rest be. I am only insisting on the blessing of being able to make each unit of our lives as it comes, and making the best of it, making it perfect, making it ideal. One day well spent is a pledge for those that are coming. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this and being so patient with me. I really hope you enjoyed this one. Peace.
Thanks for listening to As Within, So Without. Visit us at aswithinsowithoutpodcast.com for extra content such as blog posts, show notes, and more. There you can also subscribe to our email list, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. If you have questions, comments, or suggestions for future shows, you can contact Riley directly at riley@aswithinsowithoutpodcast.com. Thanks again for listening.